We're just talking about the lady who's 103 at Chestnut Hill.
All right, y'all. Week 2 of the Psalms, we're gonna really get into the book today. We're gonna look at both Psalm 1 and Psalm 19. Sharon, welcome. Everybody else has said hello this morning. Also, we're celebrating the birthday of Lynn Jones today.
Yay!
Another one. We're very glad for it.
Yes.
So I was looking at poems that also, one of the things that Rabbi Feld does is not only does he gives a subtitle for each of his psalms, and the subtitle for Psalm 1 is beginning, which makes sense because it is the first psalm, and he talks a great deal about why it's not just an accident that it's the first psalm, right? Like it's purposeful, and I loved knowing that, and I love knowing that about so many things that we take for granted or just don't think about. This was new learning for me, and the way he ties it to the whole Psalter, and not only that, but all of like kind of biblical theology. And so I just enjoyed all of that so much. But I was looking at, yeah, Kate, you look concerned or?
No, I would just said that I have read chapter 1 about 4 times. I have enjoyed every word of chapter 1.
Yeah.
I mean, it was incredible.
Right, because it's personal for him. I mean, yes, he's a scholar and all of that, and he knows his stuff, but it's personal. And that tie-in to me, like, you know, I think he does better in chapter 2 when he talks about this, but sometimes when we read something in scripture, often in the Old Testament, we're confused by what we read. Where does this fit? I don't understand how to make this work. It troubles me, right? And then he gives credence to that and says like, yeah, that's exactly what you should be feeling. You should be feeling confused and anxious and worried about it, and that here's why and how we might, you know. And so I'm not sure he's giving us all the answers. I don't want to know all the answers because of what would tomorrow bring. But he does gives context to me. He makes space for things that I didn't know where to put, or I just didn't think about, or, you know, you just walk around confused, which, you know, I mean, it's normal for most of us. It's just normal. Confusion is just part of living.
Well,
so anyway,
songs are that way.
That's right, and that was his whole point. So there's a little poem by David Harris that I'm going to read called Starting Over. Within every life, there comes a time when you need to take a break to start something new. A point at when your life seems stale and starting over is the only thing to do. Not everyone wants to do it. In fact, most refuse to try. They idle away each day, not realizing they need to do something new. The world passes by them as they stand at the garden gate, and before they know it, starting over for them is too late. Therefore, if you need to get out of a rut before it is too late, start looking for something new to enhance your life with beauty, which you have forgotten what it is like. Starting over can make you a better person, sometimes even better than before. Give that to her.
Thank you.
So Psalm 1, and so I wrote in the notes where to begin. We begin at the beginning. And isn't it wonderful that we begin with a blessing? Good morning, Maisie. Welcome.
She's blocked. I mean,
Charlotte.
muted.
So the beginning. Talk to me about, I mean, I have written down some notes that the reason that why Psalm 1 carries its importance is because it demonstrates this arc from one person walking with God to a vision where all God's creation celebrates God, and then introduces us to this biblical theology where good folks are blessed and evil is destroyed. And isn't that our hope? Does it always work that way? No, it does not work that way. Hardly ever works that way, but here we have it. Also, some of the other poetic elements that are introduced in Psalm 1, parallelism, metaphor, simile, doubling or tripling of the themes. You'll see that in many psalms. I like that it compares the outer life of those who are evil, with the inner life of those who are good. Another commentator writes that Psalm 1, I think this is James May, which is in this big, huge book, the interpretation, this is a commentary. He has all the books of the Bible, not in this volume, but in separate volumes. And this one is on the Psalms. And the editor is James May. And he writes, Psalm 1 is all about the existence of humanity and sets up Torah. Get extra credit. And Kate, you can't answer the question. If you can know what Torah is.
The first 5 books of the Bible.
Yes, and what other implication does that mean? It is indeed the law, the first 5 books, but it is, if I don't capitalize it, if I use Torah with a small t, what does that mean?
Japanese war cry.
Oh.
Torah.
I remember that movie. It means a way of living, right? The way we construct our lives, like what we do, what our life is about. Maybe we might call that a rule of life, right? So it introduces Torah as a means of grace. Okay, so we can break that down, right? Because I got a lot of words in there. But if it's a way of living as a means of grace, that means it's a gift from God, right? We know grace is a gift from God, comes from God, given freely. Torah, as a gift, provides the grace that is demonstrated in the Beatitude. And why do I talk about Beatitudes? Because how does Psalm 1 begin?
Blessed.
Yes. And that's a beatitude, a blessing. And blessed is the one, it says. Blessed is the one. Well, let's look at the psalm itself. And then we're going to get into blessing.
It's on page 12.
On page 12, thanks, Ginger. And he's gone to great lengths. He's got footnotes about why he's chosen the words he's chosen. He talked in the introduction a bit about his the way he was going to use language and the importance to him of having the most correct Hebrew translation, from the Hebrew that he could get. So we're going to trust the rabbi on that one because I am not a Hebrew scholar. He explains why he stays with the male pronoun, which I think I appreciated. At least he gave it a nod. So the word blessing right off the bat. Let's. Who would like to read? Can we read all the way through it? Kate, would you like to do that? Okay.
Sure, I think. Blessed is the person who has not pursued the counsel of the wicked, nor stood with sinners on their way, nor sat with the indolent. Rather, his desire is for the teachings of Adonai, intoning his teaching day and night. For he will be a tree planted astride of streams, bearing fruit in season. Its leaves never shivering, everything thriving. Not so the wicked, who are only like chaff tossed by the wind. So the wicked will not stand up in court, excuse me, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For Adonai knows the way of the just, but the way of the wicked will be lost.
What translation is that?
That's his translation.
Okay.
That was in the book, that was what's
In the book.
Yeah, and the books are still coming, so.
Yeah, okay.
I already just wanted okay, that's what.
Just a little bit different, yeah. So he's tried to stay as close to the Hebrew as he can. There's always going to be different. Some translations might begin by saying happy is the person. Sometimes happy is used as as an equivalent of blessed. But I think if we, can we just go with what stands out for you? What was a response that you had to reading the song? Not, doesn't have to be anything like, I don't know, just what was your response to it? You had one, right? Everyone had a feeling, an emotion, a thought. I'm looking at this very intelligent group of people.
So I'll say, because I told you last time, I've never kind of been into the Psalms. I think what they say is, I'll focus more on the Gospels, because it's the same type message. But this was really, this whole discussion, beginning of it is very helpful. And what really struck me, and out of all this, is his description, kind of on the next page or two, of the different images of evil. And I thought that was brilliant. And I'm still asking myself, how do you get all this out of this? It's just maybe my uncomfortableness with poetry.
I was gonna ask you about how comfortable you were with poetry.
I'm zero comfortable.
I went to a liberal arts college. I studied
Accounting.
No, I didn't. I studied history. I was a history major. I took some English, but poetry really wasn't what I was studying. And I still don't know how you get out of what he's got, what the song says, how you get what I think is a brilliant idea of these different images of evil. And I particularly love the one that he called indolent. I mean, that just kind of opened my eyes. I know people like that. Maybe I am one. I don't know.
Right? I think that was his point, that sometimes we can say, oh, I'm not that. I'm pretty sure I'm not, I'm not that kind of evil.
Right.
But he does narrow it down to sort of say, ooh, when do I participate in some sort of evil and not even either know it and ignore it or don't even know it?
Right.
Yeah.
So this whole idea of indolence is kind of a new way of thinking, and I realize, because I've got some friends that I really, some good friends, and I feel like kind of do that. They throw the bombs into the arena of good. I don't think they probably don't think about it. They don't realize it. And we probably all do it and don't realize it. And so I thought that was brilliant coming out of all this stuff. I still don't know how you get from A to B, but
Well, he gives a pretty good, at least talks about how he got there.
right. He did. I can get it. I can understand it in this particular case, but I think when you get to the next poem, I'm not sure I can make the connection.
That's right.
Yeah, you
Because
had
the
to come
next
up with that.
the next poem he chooses, the next psalm he chooses is different.
Right.
And he's like, so I went about it this way. And I thought, well, how would you know to do that?
Right.
But that also because I'm kind of a literalist, even though I think I'm not, I really am. So Rob and I were talking about what movies we would use in Lent to particularly talk about certain themes. And he's mentioning like 27 movies. And I'm like, I can't even think of one. I can't even think of one movie at this moment that has them. But anyway, so I have to stretch. I remember, I took the first course in poetry I ever took, and it was a very bad choice. I took the poets of the Victorian era. Someone should have shot me. I didn't understand anything about poetry except rhyme schemes. And so I couldn't, I remember reading as basic as The White Cliffs of Dover.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's like a basic, everyone has to read that poem. I couldn't get it. I was like, it's a geography lesson. No. It's about death. And I was like, what? How is it about death? Anyway, so I feel you. I feel you on that. Like I spent the whole quarter going, I'm none of this. Why did I spend $37 on this book?
Yeah.
And I got a D- or something. So decided that wasn't what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I'm like her too. I'm a poetry person, but what really just struck me, and this is gonna be a big shock to everybody or anybody that knows me because I love to garden, was the third verse. For he will be as a tree planted astride streams, bearing fruit in season, its leaves never shriveling, everything thriving.
Yeah, I like that,
I
that's
just
positive thinking.
Yeah, I just thought it was beautiful. But then, he goes on to explain that too. The never dying, ever fruitful tree, always flourishing, for it lives by the side of flowing water, depicts the fullness of God's blessing, a life always assured of divine nourishment. Well, that's what I really got
How
out of
do you
that.
make that connection?
Because he knows enough about what he would call biblical theology, right? That these images, and do we find images of trees throughout scripture? We certainly have, right? We have. Do we find images about water throughout scripture? Absolutely we do. Did Jesus use the images of a tree and water in his conversations and teachings? Yes.
Yeah.
So he knew and had studied this Psalter the same way we know. Probably not in the same way we are. I don't think they had Zoom. But anyway, I know they didn't. Anyway, I just think, I love this part and I'm not, now I don't have to read them toward Jesus. I don't have to. I can just read them as a way to understand what I don't understand about God the Creator. And I think that he does more of this when he gets to chapter 2. But I realize how I have, and I don't mean this in a bad way, y'all, I just have slid into this idea of how science rules, even in my own mind, and has supplanted some of the power and majesty and creative ability of God. Right? It just is because of, where we live and how we live and what we're surrounded by. I don't think it's not a sin. I just think I have been encouraged and buoyed up by this understanding of God as like that, like verse 3, and that it is my assent to, my agreement to, my ability to sit and understand God in that way. And instead of it being about me and about my wonderful intellect or my powers of reasoning or my ability to be with people or whatever I think I have, right? And it changes my focus. It moves it from me-centered. But the Psalms do exactly the same thing. We see in the Psalms that same human condition that has existed since people stood upright and started saying, who is God and what does this all mean? So that human condition is throughout the Psalms, and that's the other part. It's like also not new.
So I've just got one question.
Oh, gosh.
I read the Psalm, and then I read his understanding of it.
Good.
That's beautiful. It's brilliant. It makes a lot of sense. I understand it. So how, other than getting this guy to follow me around, how do I become better at doing it?
I don't know. Maybe when we get to the end of the book, Herb, I'll ask you if you are any better at it, or if it's a process and that it might just open up some glimmer of something. And whether that's temporary for the next 6 weeks or whether it lasts longer than
You're
that.
being optimistic.
I know. I know. Anyone else?
Well, I would want to say that I loved it so much. Like I told you, I sat up all night and kept reading it over and over again because it was so God-based and that thrilled me that it took us back to God. And I think that what I felt like was that all of us have a little bits of all the different people he mentioned. And I think that that's the realization that you put that there so that you think, whoops, or maybe I've learned about the good people, which I think that I am, but then there are all of us slip in and out of the different categories at different times, maybe even not knowingly, but that we all are there. And and that God knows all these kind of people. I mean, he is aware that all of us can have those parts of our personalities. And so
Right.
to have it written down and know that, okay, I have done that, yuck, does that just put me in that other? No, that everybody carries all of those personalities with them. At least that's what I felt like after I read it.
I think so, and I think he sums it up, his last paragraph, when he's kind of saying, so what? The takeaway that most of life is not black and white, or, it's not one way or the other, not all good and not all evil, right? So, she said, oh no. So you answered that question, Kate, like, what does that mean for us? We can find ourselves in this. It's not beyond us. It doesn't exist outside of our realm of knowing. It's not like you say, I have no idea what this dude is talking about, right? That's not what your experience was. That's not what I've heard you say anyway. Your experience was, oh, I see that. I see how I am both of that. I see how there is an ambiguity about life and the struggle to accept what God offers, to believe that, to trust in that, to live into that.
I kept hearing John Lennon Imagine through this whole thing. I kept hearing the tune as I'm reading this, and it's like, it was just really a very strange experience for me,
Yeah.
this first chapter. It really.
Good. I want you to have a strange experience. I love that. So it acknowledges our struggle and points us toward the parousia, I think, the time when God is all in all. So that's what it's talking. I mean, that's the movement. And I just love the way he was able to tie blessed with then at the end of Psalm 150, the hallelujah at the end of Psalm 150. This, I don't know why that made me so happy. So few things in life are so tidy. I get that. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's the tidiness of that someone recognized that people for a long time, for 4,000 years have thought about it. It's just awesome to me. That's the part that we are part of something so much bigger than we are, and so much more, not just scholarship. What would the word be? Devotion. So much devotion and praise of God, and how that is so tied to the Psalms. That response being praise, coming out of that. Anything else about, I have one more thing I wrote at the top of the second handout, because it's 10:30, so I want to move on to Psalm 19. According to Brueggemann, you remember him, Walter Brueggemann, Spirituality of the Psalms? Brueggemann says that both Psalms 1 and 19 are songs of Torah. They acknowledge a well-ordered world created by God. And that order depends on God's faithfulness, God's power, and God's graciousness. The order of creation is seen in the Torah, and I should have capitalized that Torah. It's God's will and purpose in the very structure of life. It remains this way when the covenant of the Torah is upheld and when obedient attention is paid. Anything else about Psalm 1? Happy, blessed are you.
Did you just read the last paragraph on page 19?
Yes.
I just wanted a little clarification.
Yes, I love this. On page 19, by the end of the first psalm, the author has taken us through quite a journey. The surety of God's ultimate presence and justice has offered consolation for whatever tribulations the good person may currently suffer, as wrongdoers strut about exercising power in society. The poet's pen paints a different picture than contemporary experience, and art has overcome reality. Belief has triumphed through the painting of a word picture. See this, okay, I can make it political. I'm trying to think of something that's not political to use as an example, but it's very difficult. Perhaps what's happening in many libraries. I don't know. There are things that are going on in the world that trouble me, right? That I feel like are evil. I don't, and I have to sit among them while it's happening. And I feel like there's no recompense. There's no consequence. There's no one's going around slapping their wrist with a ruler. Nothing's happening. And I think, so I in some ways I'm like, well, this isn't new. I hear about it more because I have my phone, which sends me a message and buzzes every time somebody behaves badly. My phone doesn't buzz and tell me when people behave like good people. It doesn't, I don't have that app. I need that app. I have the app that says, the judge said this, the thing did this, the council voted this way, right? Anyway, and to know that in the long run, what is God's will for God's people? Right.
That paragraph was just because I wonder so often why. I mean, he made it very clear that, if you were a Jew running through Poland, you could you could see the difference between the Nazis, evil and not. But that paragraph where it's all around you, all kinds of things are around you. And that's one of my biggest questions is why doesn't somebody do something? Why, and I'm thinking, well, why don't you do something? Well, a force of one, I do what I can. But that paragraph, I don't know, it was just, I just thought it was terrific.
Good. Well,
and it bothered me,
yes,
enough.
And it stuck with you. Yeah. I think you could turn it into a prayer, Kate.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, Psalm 19, and he calls the subheading of this is prayer. This is introducing to us this, it takes this idyllic sense of sitting, and receiving and the goodness of God and God's thing all the way around. Remember, these are psalms of joy, or as Brueggemann calls them, songs of orientation. These are pointed songs of creation. These are about the goodness. Now, 19 moves us from the goodness and begins to tear apart that ambiguity that we all feel about, which Kate expressed in having me read that paragraph. Like, okay, but why? Or what's my role? Or why does this happen? Or all the other things. Like, we're aware of that. We're aware of this disconnect. And I say right away that Rabbi Feld, I think rightly, writes that every poem is a journey. Maybe this helps us, or us literal thinkers, and that we are different people at the end of reading a poem than we were at the beginning. That poetry somehow does what prose doesn't always do, to move us, and that its purpose is transformative. I just love that idea.
Allison,
Yes.
would you tell Maisie that the book is at home?
Oh, Maisie, the book is at home. Sharon.
Oh. Oh, okay, thanks.
Don't leave. She was
Oh.
without stop this week.
Okay. All right. So every great poem, I mean, he does say great poem. So I don't know about Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, if that mood is, would they be considered great poetry? But he does, I don't know what his definition of great poetry is, but I think that's like art, isn't it? great poetry would be in the eye of the reader.
Beholder.
Right? Yes.
And
that's my problem.
Beholder.
Yeah. And sometimes it is what I have learned, it's just by the reading of poetry. It's just by the reading of poetry. And it moves us, so Psalm 1 moved us from present to future. Okay? We know that. And sees the life of the righteous fulfilled in the end time, whose imagining is made fully present through poetic art. In contrast, Feld writes, Psalm 19 remarks on creation and is filled with rhetorical devices that communicate the experience of God's continuous presence. Okay. He says when he struggles with a psalm, he starts to look at the stanzas. Okay. I know what that means. Groupings of couplets or sentences or however that comes across. And so in his looking at the stanzas, he saw there were three distinct kind of conversations happening in the poem. The first part of the psalm celebrates God's continuing involvement with God's people and then demonstrates our ambivalence about it. And he uses the sun or nature, did he not, in Psalm 19? Do you want to let's read it before we get any further? Ted probably should read it. Sharon, are you up for reading this? You have to read it from the book though, because it's different.
Have to.
From the conductor, a Davidic song. The heavens recount God's glory. The sky proclaims the work of his hands. One day pours out speech to another. Night informs a next night. There is no speech, and there is no expression whose sounds go unheard. Their waves travel throughout the world, their message to the ends of the earth. In their midst, he placed a tent for the sun, who is like a groom coming forth from the chamber, like an athlete joyously running his course. At the end of heaven it rises. Its circuit reaches the other end, and nothing escapes its heat.
Let's stop there. That's the end of what he considers this first grouping. You can see this nature message.
Yeah.
Irv, you got that. You got the nature message, right? All right.
Yeah.
All right. And then also he introduces this idea of speech. This idea of speech, this talking, knowing, and Feld goes into great detail about the direction of the speech, the what would be the word, the evolution of the speech, and how it moves from third person to first person, not in this stanza, but throughout the psalm. The sun, there's an interesting concept here that the sun and the stars and the moon and the creation, this is not just something that exists. This is created by God just as we are created by God. This is one of those ahas, epiphanies that I had while reading this. That I don't know, it's just a little tweak on how I talk about God or how I know God. And so that it put us as human beings, but in that same realm. I mean, when we read the Genesis story, I think we're so used to hearing it that we talk about the order, or we want to talk about how long did it take, or we want to talk about whether it was 4,000 years ago, or 2 million or 2 billion years ago, instead of just that. I can't even, my language fails me to talk about that, just that, the beauty of that, all of it. Is there anything you would say about the first 7 verses there?
I loved how the language of the stars is silent to us, and then later he tells that they have learned the sun does emit a language, a sound.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
It's just fascinating.
Well, verse number 3, too. I mean, it's just one day pours out speech to another. Night informs a next night. I've never thought of, day and night like that before.
Yeah. As a communication from one to the next. Also how it reflects Jewish understanding of when day begins. Day doesn't begin, with the rising of the sun. Day begins with the setting of the sun. That is the day, that is when the day ends and the new day begins. So I thought that was interesting. Because in the Western world, we say day begins at 12 midnight, but normally we think about a day as beginning when the sun comes up, right? But yes, this talking, this speech that's communicated all the time. And what is the speech? Is the speech about, what is the speech? The speech is about God's graciousness, God's faithfulness, God's love. That's what the speech is about. That's the conversation that's happening. The happening is praise language that's happening. It's just a very, we've all read love poetry, and we sometimes we get it and sometimes we don't. I think this first 7 verses here is a delicious bit of love poetry.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how about
It
this?
also speaks to me to the interconnectivity of everything. Because everything works together. Not most things, but everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
The synergy of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
the
love-
creation,
And I,
creation. Go ahead,
Go ahead, Lawson.
sister, you go ahead.
and I love the order of it because I have so much disorder in my life.
Yes, ma'am.
I love the order of it.
Yes, me too. I think that's it. Thank you for naming that. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Irv, can you top that? No.
I never try to talk myself.
No. I was gonna say, I don't either. But would you like to add something?
No, I just think, the creation is a big thing to me. God, that's kind of the beginning of my spiritual journey, is looking at creation and the creator and all of that. And
Very big.
And it's everything, and, this speaks to that big time in ways that we might not even think about.
Well, certainly Rabbi Feld pointed those out in ways I had not thought about. He spends a great deal of time talking about that. So, all right. Then we move on to the second stanza that he puts down, and here's where Torah comes in again, right? And so let's see, I had Sharon, are you comfortable reading, Lynn? Okay, so it'd be 7 through 11, yes.
The teaching of Adonai is perfect, renewing life. The decrees of Adonai are enduring, making wise the simple. The precepts of Adonai are just, gladdening the heart. The instruction of Adonai is loosening, lightening up the eyes. The fear of Adonai is pure, abiding forever. The judgments of Adonai are true, righteous altogether.
You can go ahead and read 11.
More desirable than gold, more than shining metal, sweeter than honey, than the drippings of the comb.
Thank you. So what does Torah do? You have the nouns there: teaching, decrees, precepts, instruction. The fear of Adonai is pure. The judgments. You have all those things that Torah provides. He says it in a slightly different way, doesn't he? But there's no, it all comes from God, because, and then look at the direct objects: is perfect, are enduring, are just, is lucid, are true, and desirable. This is God's purpose in Torah. And so providing this way to live in keeping Torah, following a rule of life, whatever that means, that's the gift that the Creator gives. In praise of Torah. It doesn't end here, because I think all of y'all have heard the Psalms for most of your life. And so these statements about Torah, you know that they're found throughout the Psalms.
Yeah.
They're found throughout the Old Testament. They're not, this isn't new teaching in the sense that, oh, this has never been said anywhere before. It's definitely said here and repeated. But it's said, this is the poetry coming in. This is that parallelism that Feld talks about, right? This is one of those constructs of poetry, parallelism. It repeats, right? And why do we do that? Well, we know that from storytelling. When something is repeated, we're able to remember it better, right? It's a mnemonic in a sense. We're able to remember it more clearly, repeat it, tell that story again. What a lovely thing to be able to say the teaching of Adonai is perfect. The decrees of Adonai are enduring. The instruction of Adonai.
It's all
Right?
good.
There we go. So anything about that, and then it ends with this, with verse 11, that talks about how the teachings of God, as we find in Torah, as we find in living a Torah life, look at what that is. It's more desirable than gold, more than anything shiny. Now, you can make that about anything. If you're a person who follows shiny objects like I do and is easily distracted by them, like a squirrel, then you know, I get this. And then not only is that, but it's sweeter. Who doesn't love honey? And it's sweeter than honey. It's sweeter than, and isn't that poetic? I mean, that's just, we don't really talk like that in normal parlance. We like to, you know, but isn't that, it sticks in your mind. Anything else? I think, go ahead, Laura.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Feld was able to talk about the connection between the first stanza and the second. And I wouldn't have noticed that if he hadn't talked about it, how God's words are like the sun, which every day illuminates the earth. And, you know, it offers us clarity as we walk through life. So he was able to make connections that, you know, I didn't see myself.
Yes, so the sun then is equated to Torah, right? That God created the sun and God created Torah. And just as the sun shines everywhere, I think he does say this. I don't think I thought this up. Just as the sun shines everywhere, Torah is everywhere. And that connect, and then using speech, again, the speech of the created world and the speech of the sun, the speech is found in Torah. And it gives life to all who hear it. Yeah, thank you, Laura, for that. So it's not disconnected. Like, it's not like, oh, he thought about this thing like nature, and then he thought about Torah, and then he, no, there's a connection between, and I think that's why he chose Psalm 19 to, do this exposition on, because it does it so good, because then the next stanza says, I see all that, right, as the reader or the writer of the psalm, I see that, I see nature, I see that loveliness of creation that I had nothing to do with, that I know I see and hear Torah's teaching. Why am I behaving like I behave? Why am I in a human body? Why am I responding like I respond? This is then the cry that begins to have a place in because it's in our human story. This is it. I get all that, and then yet something horrible happens or whatever. I don't know, my pants don't fit. I don't know what it is. I mean, all kinds of things happen to us. Probably not anybody else, again, not anybody else's story but mine. Okay,
That's okay.
let's do the last. I want you to look for, because Laura pointed it out really well, look for the connections in the next 4 verses that take you back either to stanza 1 or stanza 2. Okay, so there is a connection if we go, and I'm not doing this so we can learn about poetry, y'all. I mean, I think that I'm trying to teach a little bit about how the poetry points us towards something larger. That's all. That's my only thing. I'm not a good poetry teacher. That would never be my call. And nor may be a good spiritual teacher. But, Ginger, are you comfortable reading 12, 13, 14, and 15 for us? Nice and loud? Thank you, honey.
And your servant is illumined by them. Obeying them is of great consequence. Who can be aware of errors? Cleanse me of hidden ones. Separate your servant from sinners. Let me remain innocent, that I be cleansed of grave offense. Be pleased with the words of my mouth and the intonation of my heart expressed to you, Adonai, my rock and my Redeemer.
Thank you.
First,
let's look at
my
the
rock and salvation.
Yeah, well, Redeemer, salvation, very close, right? What words do you see that connect you back?
The words of my,
The words of my mouth.
Mm-hmm. Also, right there in verse 12, y'all, and your servant is illumined
Like the sun.
like the sun. I'm sure I read that in his book. I'm pretty sure I didn't come up with that. And then you see the questions. This is us and our questions. This is us and our questions.
Yeah, who can be aware of errors?
Right? I'm gonna fall short. I'm gonna mess up. I'm gonna create a great offense, or maybe just a minor one. But I'm asking God to help me remain innocent and find a way back.
You know, the next page you broke down the hymn written by Charles Wesley.
I did.
And those are such good words, and it's a pretty hymn.
It is. All right, we have 6 minutes left. So, what else? I want to say that, that Klaus Westermann, who in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, professor in Germany, really took the time to translate the Psalms. And he did it into German, so people have translated his work into English. This is still the standard textbook for seminary students, the Psalms, on learning about the Psalms. And he writes that the heavens reveal the glory of God, and to exalt and praise God that means that the existence is the most real reality. So when we can get, what I took that to mean is, when I can get off track and start deciding what I think is real, what I want to sort of say is reality, maybe that's my budget, maybe that's my relationship, maybe that's other things. I need to recall that the heavens, God's creation, if you will, reveals the glory of God, and that praise is the real reality. Me recognizing God, giving thanks for that, is the real reality. Not something that's flitting across my screen, not something that's occupying my waking moments at 2:30 in the morning, right? That's not what's real. And I loved that. And I don't know why Westermann, I mean, I do know why, because this was the study of his life. But all is of God. Sun, moon, and stars, just as we are of God. And Ginger's right. On the last page of my notes, I put the words I think it's based on Psalm 19. Hymnary, whatever that website is, says that it's based on Psalm 78. But in any case, I think it's based on Psalm 19. Christ, whose glory fills the sky, Christ, the true and only light, Son of righteousness, arise, triumph over the shade of night. Day spring from on high be near, day star in my heart appear. Dark and cheerless is the morn, unaccompanied by thee. Joyless is the day's return, till thy mercy's beams I see. Till thy inward light impart, glad my eyes and warm my heart. Visit then this soul of mine, pierce the gloom of sin and grief. Fill me, radiancy divine, more and more thyself display, shining to the perfect day.
Allison, would you do me a favor and hum or
Yes,
sing?
sure. It's, yeah. Christ, whose glory fills the skies, Christ the true and only Son of righteousness, arise, triumph o'er the shade of night. Day spring from on high be here, day star in my heart.
We sang that.
The tune also is brightest and best, or the something of the morning, or the stars of the morning. It's the tune name is Dix, D-I-X. There's another tune hymn that we could sing this to, but that's the one that's most known.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's pretty.
Well, thank you all. Next week, your assignment is, who's got their agenda handy? Ginger, what are we supposed to read next week?
I think, the 18th, chapters 3 and 4, Psalm 8 and 91.
Okay, we're going to be looking at creation psalms. We're still in joy or orientation, okay? These are still psalms that we're going to go slowly, or so we don't really jump right into those lamenting ones that really confuse us. So I hope that you enjoy reading them, pondering them in your heart, and until
I
next
think
week.
it's good, and you also ask us about our favorite poem about Mary Oliver.
Yes.
Maria.
The best quote from Mary Oliver is, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your wild and precious life?"
That's it. That's a beautiful one.
I love it.
I love that one too.
Yeah.
Or my other favorite one is, what is prayer? Prayer is a purple iris.
Oh, that's so good.
Yes.
Is it what?
A purple iris,
Oh.
all right? Well,
Yeah.
good to see you all. Stay warm, stay safe.
Allison,